Hello, and welcome to our special series of Green Elephant interviews during March 2021, supporting the annual B Corps month. B corporations, or B Corps for short, are businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency and legal accountability to balance profit and purpose. Throughout March, we are chatting with key people in companies which have chosen to certify as B Corps and become a force for good. Okay, today I have been joined by Kate Sandle and Debbie Thackray from B Labs UK. I was going to say B Corp straight up there. B Labs UK is the charity at the heart of the UK's B Corp movement. The B Labs across the world assess, verify and certify businesses to the B Corp standard, promote the B Corporation movement and build a vibrant and supportive community. Kate Sandle is Director of Programs and Engagement at B Labs UK, and Debbie is the Community Engagement Manager, or one of them, I believe. Welcome to the show, both.
Great, thanks for having us.
No problem at all. Can I kick off? I'd like to know a little bit about the people behind the B Labs, because you're a pair of dark horses to me from what I've been reading. So, Kate, as far as I get it, you've been at B Labs since the charity was formed in 2015. Is that correct?
Since we launched in the UK, October 2015. Yes, I have.
What drew you to B Labs as a career choice?
Yeah, good question. It wasn't really a thing back then, so it was
it an accidental thing? Was it?
Not. Do you know what? Not at all. I kind of moved around in my career, kind of worked in events and conferencing. Then I worked in an Israeli Palestinian charity, which is where I was working at the time. A lot of it was looking at economic development within the world and what economic development could bring to Israel and Palestine, to the conflict that existed there. And so a lot of the way that we're looking at is innovative financing. And that kind of comes back to, first of all, business being able to create change, but also just the way that you engage with business to be able to leverage social change. And so I've always been really passionate that businesses can create change, and looked for roles before CSR really existed, and applied for one place 3 times because I thought it was the only place that really did what I wanted to do. They're still not a B Corp, but they're on the journey. And
therefore not mentioning the name, I see.
No, exactly. Okay. But yeah, and then through someone found out that something was launching that was in the US, and I had a rainy coffee. I was offered a part-time 6-month contract, so I could leave my full-time permanent contract to join this random thing and see if it went, and roll on 5.5 years later.
And to the position now, because you were a community engagement manager at the beginning, therefore, and made your way now to being the director of programs and engagements. What's that all about?
I think I found my contract the other day, and I think my first title was outreach manager. I'm not sure. We weren't. We didn't really. There wasn't a path. I don't really know. I didn't have a job description. That was for sure. You kind of joined. You just got on board and got involved, and so there isn't really a part of B Lab that I haven't touched, in the sense of just creating where we are, and everyone there was 3 of us, 4 of us, 5, 4, 3, then back up to 5. And now we're at 10, I think, just about to reach kind of 11 or 12. So it's been an interesting ride, but now I've got a team, which is just incredibly exciting. And Debbie joined us last year, about this time last year.
Lockdown, as I can work.
I think it was 2 weeks into the lockdown. So I had my interview before the lockdown hit, and then 2 weeks later it happened, and then I joined the team virtually, which is really interesting experience.
Yeah, and so I mean, yours obviously early in your journey, but you've come from corporate responsibility and kind of sustainability for one business since you left uni, as far as I read it, and then you was this a risk, or was this where you wanted to be? Is this your hooray, I found my
this was definitely, I think, essentially my dream job, because I was really looking for a community of companies that genuinely wanted to do the action behind the conversation that they were having. And I think when you find that, it's a very unique experience to be so privileged to kind of see that. And every conversation that I have is just so positive, because it's just so positive, because every company is genuinely wanting to do more and share more and learn from each other and help each other come along. And I don't really know what other type of organizational role is quite like that. So for me, this was very much an amalgamation of my 3 previous job experiences of continuous improvement, corporate social responsibility, and then working for a chairman for a couple of years, more on kind of a business management side, I suppose you could say, and kind of merging those 3 roles into one to work with this community. Yeah, it was a really incredible opportunity, and found it by chance on LinkedIn. So very glad I did.
Good old LinkedIn. So we're getting social platform plugs in early. Find your job on your ideal job on LinkedIn. So what is it to be a community engagement manager then, officer? Person?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different, I suppose, streams within that. So one is looking after part of our community. So I work with a collection of our companies around essentially account management. So making sure that they get the most out of what we have to offer, but also helping to support them in raising their voices and championing their voices to help the community also grow and learn from them in return. And also just making sure that they're enjoying their experience. And then the second part is around that kind of collective collaboration of where we have companies having the same conversations. How do we bring them together and support them in having those conversations together, so that it's easier for them to collaborate and share best practice, and then hopefully help everybody else also come along on that journey with them. So I suppose a bit like a connector across the community, you could say.
Yeah. One of the reasons I wanted to speak to you, because as a charity, you yourselves can't be a B Corp, can you? Because you're
Absolutely.
not for profit.
Yeah.
So it's a different conversation today, and I think probably for those, if I could ask you, Kate, if you met somebody who'd never heard of a B Corp, runs a business, what would you say B Corps was, and why should they pay any attention to it?
Yeah, gosh, it's a big question. I'll probably take them in 2 halves. So I've had that conversation many times, and amazingly less frequently at the moment, which is great, and mainly because I'm not meeting many people. But actually, I think I always break it down to 3 things, and I think sometimes people think it's just a certification. They don't know about the community, and I think that's key. So it's a certification of good, responsible businesses who measure their environmental and social performance, and they have to meet a high standard, and they have to be accountable and transparent. So their assessment goes on our website, on our global website, and wherever that is all over the world. So it's a great way to understand what you're doing as a business, and as a bit of due diligence, right? Asking yourself questions most people haven't asked themselves before. The community thing is so important. It's a way that we can keep pushing ourselves to keep improving. The fact that you have to recertify every 3 years means that this isn't something you can just rest on your laurels with. This is something you really have to engage with. And Debbie's role really is about that. The engagement thing is really key. So how do we get businesses to improve, to learn from each other, to push each other, and to hold each other to account, and whether that's in a working group or just online and on the Beehive. And that's really key, because one of the most important messages, and I think sometimes gets misconstrued with B Corps, is that they're not perfect. They're not the best businesses in the world, and they're yeah. But some people do. They expect them to be absolutely perfect, and if they do something wrong or something that they disagree with, they can be quite upset about it. And the reality is they just reach a really high standard, and it's verified and it's independent, and that's really, really key. But kind of going back to the question, the third thing, which to me is the most important thing, is the reason why we exist, and is something that often is not spoken about at all, is that I describe it as a movement. And I describe it as a movement because we're trying to create change. We're trying to change the operating system of capitalism. And people think we're mad, or then they ask if we're communist. And actually, we're not saying that capitalism is the wrong thing. We're saying the way that it works. So the shareholder primacy, this kind of idea that the business of business is business, kind of Milton Friedman has a lot to answer for. But the way that we try and engage in that is kind of twofold. So one is creating a free assessment tool for anyone to use, the B Impact Assessment. Then it's certifying a community of leaders who improve. So that's our community. And then we're also trying to create change from a legislative level as well. So in the US, where the belief is very strong around shareholder primacy, we had to be able to implement a way of working where you operate for the benefit of people and planet. We had to change legislation, and we had to change that across every single state. So 35 down, which is very exciting. And you're a benefit corporation. That's the legal form that we have in the US. We've also changed in Italy, Colombia, Ecuador, British Columbia, and there's a version of it in France as well. And we are very soon, very close to when this podcast is going out, launching a campaign in the UK to change legislation and to mandate that all businesses have a material positive impact on people and planet. So more to come on that. But yeah,
we have the very first in the month was Bates Wells. No, I was speaking to Martin.
Great.
And we had a chat about the Better Business Act. So it's already out there a bit, but
it is. We're trying to hold it back before the media.
I know, but the website's there, so it's a bit tasty to go have a look at.
The cat's out of the bag, but yeah,
it is a bit. But yeah, I know you're edging around it, but I've decided to fess up that it'd already been mentioned. Debbie, Kate just mentioned the community. Now, obviously, that's at the heart of the very role you do. What makes the community so special to you?
That's a really good question. I think one of the things that makes our community really unique and special is, I think, the authenticity of the voices that come into that community. Nice. The shared purpose, I think, of why you become a B Corp is a very powerful one. And I think then when they kind of join the community and realize that there's so many other people that share that same vision and same purpose, they kind of set aside the competition element, and it's all about reaching that better standard all the time, or championing each other or spotlighting each other. So I think there's a real authenticity in our community that is very special, which then has enabled and fostered so many other things to kind of come and be fruitful from that situation. So I think that's one thing that makes it particularly special. And I think as well, we have quite a unique balance between leadership voices of execs or CEOs or founders wanting their businesses to run in this way, but then coupling that with all of the employee voices that also live the values of that company, create the cultures of those companies, and then create the change in that economic system that Kate was talking about, of just doing things in a different way. And so having those on the beehive and also having the leadership voices, combining those together, is really kind of hitting every different I guess leadership point within a company, which then invertedly kind of goes out into kind of stakeholder piece of being consumers or a member of society, or whatever other facet you might sit within. But I think those kind of two elements of the mixture of people in that conversation, and then the authenticity of the purpose and the want to be in that conversation, is really special.
And from my experience of it, is that's not forced. You aren't told that you have to be highly inclusive and transparent with potentially your competitors. I mean, I've sat in a room with potential competitors on a number of occasions and told them all the warts and all that are going on. The transparency is quite a powerful aspect of this. Perhaps I'll get your thought on that, Kate. Is that at the core? Is that one of the core principles of the B Corps? Is the transparency?
Yeah, I mean, they have to be incredibly transparent with us. We hear all, but you know, it's the external facing thing that I think is quite interesting, and I think more so now than actually maybe when it started, because so many businesses are talking about their sustainability or how ethical they are, and there's no way to verify it, or the bar is really low that they've set themselves. So what certification enables you is to prove that actually you've met a standard, and you've met it well if you've passed way over 80. and also breaks it down into the different areas. You can see, you know, the leaders in environment or people or governance, looking at their community and their supply chain, or the way that they interact with their customers, and often that's because their business model is creating a product or a service for an underrepresented population. But I think that transparency point is increasingly important. I think it was always in the design, it's never been any different, and that's key. But I think it's the surprise for many people that they can find out so much more about a company that maybe that hasn't been available before.
Yeah, and as I've said on a number of these episodes, you can go and look up any company that's a B Corp. You look up any company and find out if they are one for a start, and then see their score. Actually, on that point, perhaps who'd like to stomp in with the scoring bit? Who fancies having a go at that one?
How it works?
Yeah, what's the score, and does it matter?
Wow. Everyone wants a high score, don't they? You know, isn't that human nature? Don't you?
What is a high score?
Good question. So it's used to be, and it's slightly changed now, so that's why it seems a bit thing, but it's out of 200-ish, right? We've kind of stopped the cap when it comes to kind of impact business models and the purpose of a business, but roughly out of 200, 80 to certify, which is a low pass mark, right? If you suddenly think about 40%, and that passed my first year at uni, you know, that was great. I've got higher, but you know, I think there's an interesting thing there around kind of what that looks like for some businesses. 80 is hard. Most businesses get 50, and you know, there aren't many in the hundreds. There are lots, but there aren't, you know, it's really hard to get there. The highest scorer, and I haven't checked this in a couple of months, so I could be completely incorrect, is a company called South Mountain Company, and they've got 183 points, and they're in the US. So they're, you know, fascinating, worthwhile checking them out. But even Patagonia haven't got that high. And we love Patagonia. They're brilliant. They're a wonderful company, but they're not the top scorer.
No, and we're not giving any hidden secrets away. You can go look at the score. You can go look at how they which are the areas that their impact areas are perhaps their strongest and their weakest. And it's an interesting read. I've looked at 30 of them or so in detail, and it is an interesting read to find out. Perhaps Debbie, we mentioned Patagonia, and there are other companies like Ben and Jerry's and name me a few. Innocent drinks. Danone and the Alpro brand. Is it just for big business, Debbie?
No, I think that's what's incredible about the certification, is it covers every growth period of a company. So we have what we call a pending B, which is for companies who are kind of in that startup of life and build their business around wanting to be a good business. So they get a pending logo, so that kind of after their first year they can transfer into kind of full B Corp. We then have B Corp certification for lots of different levels, but the questions then adapt depending on kind of your size. So whether it's revenue or employee size, you'll get asked different types of questions. So the assessment kind of grows with you as you grow as a company. So obviously there's different levels of complexity if you're like an innocent company and you're based in multiple countries and markets. There's a different level of complexity that might come if you're maybe a 50-person company. And so I think it's an interesting certification that accounts for the differences in companies. And I think one thing that's quite unique and I suppose is important is that, especially in the UK, there's a lot of small to medium-sized businesses that make up a huge part of our economy. So our community reflects that and is a very important part of our collective voice as well, because you guys are super passionate and championing us all the time, and we want to be absolutely everywhere. So I think we represent about 45 different industries in the UK, and we love that we're in so many different places. So no, the certification is for big, small, medium, startup, which is amazing. And then we obviously have our B leaders as well, which are just very passionate individuals who are more consultant but want to help companies through that process. So lots of different ways you can kind of get involved in with what being a B Corp means.
Yeah, brilliant. It kind of brings me on to, and I'll put this one to you, Kate. Is it's been described as a move. You described it as a movement.
Yeah.
I've also heard it, and unfortunately referred to as a cult. And
Hmm.
somebody the other day referred to it as a marketing stunt.
Yeah.
And for the final one, I've just recalled is somebody said, well, I couldn't go for it because I deal with recycled waste.
Wow, that's an interesting one.
What's the truth underneath all of that?
Oh, we're all of them.
The cult leader.
We're a cult and a marketing stunt. It's a great combination. It's interesting, isn't it? I think, taking apart that cult one, I think Debbie kind of mentioned how passionate people are when they certify.
Yeah.
I remember when we were kind of starting off and meeting all of the businesses and everyone being so nice, and I thought, they're really American. Are they really fake about it? Like, are they fake about being nice, or are they really nice? And I was like, oh, actually, I think they're really nice. And so I think that's a really important thing, that actually we're so negative sometimes in the UK. And you actually, if you
Yeah.
meet a group of passionate people who like to talk about something and engage with it and engage on a different level that's driven by values, people do start to question where that comes from. But actually, it's a bit like, people have called it a tribe. I prefer that. It's like-minded organizations, like-minded people coming together because they believe in the same thing, right? They believe in the power of business, but they also believe in human rights, equality, climate justice. People understand that and they want to create change. And I think that pulls together an incredible bunch of people who you want to be with and you want to have a conversation with because you'll learn so much from. So I'll take the cult one. If people want to call us a cult, it's not the first time I've heard that. We had to be careful. At the beginning, we were building a community from nothing. So admittedly, I did take on our first retreat the whole community to a sheep shearing farm in Bristol. Because
Like you
I'd
do.
I'd worked in events, I'd worked in conferences, and there was no way I was doing one of those again. Absolutely no way. So for some reason, I was given carte blanche, and off we went, shore some sheep. Brilliant way to build some relationships. There was obviously a campfire and a few beers, and game-changing conversations around the economy. So, I think it attracts people who want to create change. They want to talk about it, and our growth is through referrals, through other businesses talking about it, through people like you taking initiative and saying, right, I'm going to dedicate our podcast to B Corps for the month of March. And that's where the beauty is. It's not us. And often we shy away from doing public conversations and speaking because it's not us, it's B Corps living and breathing it, and they're the ones who can tell you what it's really like rather than us telling you what we've heard. And I think that's also really key.
Yeah, and it was an interesting one seeing you join during lockdown, Debbie. And you may not be able to have the back experience of what it was like to go to a bee social, as they call it. There's a lot of bees around, isn't there? That's why they call it the buzz and the hive, but we won't get onto that. Getting getting people to engage. For one of the things I entered into the community with in August was kind of a right, how honest, how trustworthy, how open am I in this? And it's all online. Isn't that been a real struggle in the last 12 months?
It's interesting actually, because I think in some respects it's been a little bit freeing for us, in the sense that I think by nature of having to adapt and move to the virtual world, which obviously wasn't how we used to do things, because that meeting up of people is so important and it creates that, I think, the bedrock of what our community is and why we are so authentic. I think moving to that virtual world and the restrictions of lockdown, I suppose, have enabled us to think of different ways to do that engagement and different ways to reach out to different parts of the country and make it more accessible. And it's actually become really inclusive then, by nature of it having to be virtual, because we've got B Corps all over the country. So from the top northernmost point of Scotland down to you guys on the coast, literally everywhere. And that's really difficult if you're just hosting events in London, for everybody to attend that in a way. And so the virtual world in some senses has allowed us to just do as many events as we want and be super free in how we host them and be really inventive and fun about that. So we did a 5th birthday party in December, and we had like live musicians, we had a comedian, and like you can make it really fun. And that was a really interesting experience to try and make something like a Zoom call really different and fun, and help people still feel that authenticity of the community, but in a virtual sense where we can't physically meet up.
Yeah, it's tricky, and whilst we're talking about the community and what built, Be Local is an initiative that's growing now within that. Could you just talk to us about Be Locals?
Yeah, absolutely. So Be Locals essentially are where we notice that we've got collections of companies and B leaders as well, so the consultants who really want to champion what being a B Corp means specifically for their local region, and give back to their local communities, and also just highlight the fact that they are really great companies, and they might not be known by their kind of local area as much as they could be. So Be Locals are a way for us to help move away from just being based in London and kind of go across the entirety of the country and champion the B Corp movement where there is energy to champion it. So we have them in 7 different locations at the moment. There's 4 potentially new ones forming, and it's also a really great way to also, like Kate said, kind of create those referrals, because where you've got a collection of companies shouting about B Corp and applying it to the localization of their area, it's authentically going to then create more people interested in what B Corp is, whether you're a consumer or a company yourself, or a consultant who wants to just join in some way. And so the Be Local movement, I think, is a really interesting way to localize the movement itself while having that cohesiveness of it being a national and then global conversation that kind of all lines up really nicely then.
Yeah, it does. So we're fortunate to have one in Cornwall, and it's proving to be an interesting glimpse into the interest that is in Cornwall. So we've got 14 B Corps in Cornwall, which we're very chuffed with, seeing where we are on the peninsula and and our ruralness. But we've got at the moment, I think, about 150 that are going to be attending the launch, and so we're really looking forward to see what we can generate out of that Be Local, and interest in people perhaps turning their hand to being a force for good. Kate, could you? I mean, we're sitting here in B month, in our B month, or B Corps B month, B Corps month. God, I can't even say it now. B Corps month episodes on the Green Elephant Show. What is B Corp month, and why do we need it?
Yeah, it is a month of celebration. It's been going for probably 4 years now, and celebrated at different times, actually, all over the world. But it real started in the US and Canada, understandably, where they had kind of the biggest number of businesses in the community. And they, at the heart of this, at the heart of B Corp, is doing really good things, like running really good businesses. More than anything else, it's about the policies, it's about the practices, it's about the small things that you do that you probably don't tell anyone about. But that's what makes you a B Corp. And B Corp month is an opportunity for businesses to talk about it. Like, especially in Britain, God, we hate a brag. We've got something called a humble brag. That doesn't exist in the US, does it? And I think giving businesses the opportunity, giving them the time and the frame to be able to talk about what makes them a good business, like why are they a better business? Why are they doing all of this stuff? And the way that we've laid it out this year is literally going through each area of the assessment to say, right, this month we're going to talk about why we're nailing governance, or actually what we're not doing so good on at governance and we're working on it, or whatever that looks like for different businesses. And I think it's so important to give people that opportunity to hold that space for businesses to say, do you know what, we're working really hard on this and would really like to tell you about it. And people want to listen, but often it's just not in the right frame, or it's not delivered in the right way. So this just creates that time for them to do it.
That's brilliant. Well, as we're in the middle of B Corp month as this episode airs, I'm going to move us on to talking perhaps at some actions that you might have for me. So, what actions have I got? Let's turn to Debbie first for the action. What have you got?
Yeah, so if you are a consumer listening to this podcast, I would definitely go to We Are B Corps, which is our UK directory that lists every single B Corp in the UK community, and it will just kind of highlight to you the range of different types of companies, industries that they come from, products that they sell, or services that they offer that you might never think would be a B Corp. So I would definitely go there, check that out, and just have a peruse and see what companies you're surprised that maybe are on that list.
Yeah, and I think springing on from that is, I suppose that if you want to be more responsible, buy from a B Corp.
Yeah.
Simply as that. And if you can find a B Corp that will provide your yogurts, which you know there's somebody who can, then go buy them, because they're a force for good. What about you, Kate?
Yeah, just adding on to that actually as the frame, I think the two things, but one thing at the heart of this, which is we all need to be more responsible, right? We all need to stop passing the buck. We all need to ask more questions, and that's my biggest thing that I always tell everyone: ask someone, what's your supply chain like? What's your, social media is the most incredible enabling platform to have direct insight into companies, and it's public. So I really think that as citizens, as consumers, as business owners and business leaders, ask more questions from what you purchase, what you do. And if we all did that, God, I think the world would be a better place. So that's my big thing.
I was looking to buy some t-shirts, and we went out to a few companies to have a look, and I said, can you give me some background on your sustainability practices and your supply chain? They wrote back to me and said, what do you mean? And I went, all right. That'll do. That was due diligence done on that particular one.
Yeah, exactly. And so few people ask that question, and I just think, and the more you ask, the more people be like, hey, actually maybe we should do something about this, like we're losing customers because we're not doing it, and that's what's going to drive change.
Yeah, I mean, it is footfall, really, and the pound will make or the dollar or the yen or wherever we're talking to, where that goes, people will try and address their business to make it match, I think. Those are great tips and actions for us to do, and I'll put links to to the We Are Change. Recommendations. Start with you, Kate. What have you got to recommend for me to do or read or watch or whatever?
I think Debbie's going to give you some cracking recommendations. I'm going to give you one, and know that I fully support all of the ones that Debbie's going to do. But the one I was given it as a birthday present actually last year, which is a book called Wilding by Isabella Tree. Okay. And as someone who loves being outdoors, loves being in nature, but grown up as in suburbia, I grew up in southwest London, and so I didn't really understand farming or agriculture or kind of what was happening, and reading Wilding opened my eyes and has just given me an appreciation for like birds, for trees, for everything that's out there, for beavers, it's amazing. And I was like, why do I want to read about a tree? Oh, bloody hell, they're amazing. Like, trees are incredible. They speak to each other underground. No wonder Judi Dench did a program about them, and so it's my biggest thing is just read it, love it, and then walk outside and really appreciate it.
And then have another look. I think look through different eyes, isn't it, when you read something like that? And our natural world is amazing. The biggest problem with our natural world is actually humans.
Yeah, well, it's suicide. My favorite thing, we heard Simon Sinek actually came to speak at was being interviewed at our workplace, and he said, do you know what, bloody hell, climate change has had the wrong PR team, hasn't it? Everyone's been banging on all the time, save the planet, no one cares about the planet. Tell them that everyone's committing suicide, well, they'll start acting pretty fast. And you're like, it's absolutely true, the planet's going to be fine, it's been around for a long time. Humans, no. So yeah, suicide.
There was a BBC program once which said, what if humans disappeared today? They just all disappeared off Earth today. And it's a brilliant program, and it shows that eventually what would be the last thing would be the last remnant of I won't spoil it, I'll let you watch it, but it took 1 million years to get rid of
to recover.
Debbie, I understand you have a bevy of recommendations. This is unusual and unheard of on our show, but we'll take them all. Go
So
on.
if you're looking for something to do with what we call JEDI, so justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, I'd recommend this book. So Invisible Women. Every chapter is a different conversation. It's using data essentially to look at where there might be unconscious bias within medical practices or policies or housing regulations. And it's just a really interesting read. And I'm afraid to say, as a woman, I started off being like, this is really interesting. And then going through it, a lot of my friends just got really angry and then got really sad by the end, because they were just like, this is really frustrating how there's just so much unconscious bias that can occur. And I think that's why it's really important to actively look for that and try and adapt and change. The second one, which is, sorry.
No, it's an interesting subject. Looking at it from the other side, it's very difficult when you're trying to be as socially responsible in that particular case, I suppose, and you kind of find yourself having to really double check everything, and then fearing you've said, am I, and it's from my perspective, it's actually quite tricky when you're really trying your best to not unconsciously bias. You're kind of editing yourself and thinking, oh, it sounds, now I said it back to me, it sounds awful. So it'll be a fascinating one to read from my perspective as well.
And I think, sorry, Kate, you go.
I was just going to say some really interesting stuff about medical research, petrifying. About kind of medical research and drugs and the stuff that isn't tested on women, just because it's hard or it's complicated or our bodies are a bit different, and so most medical trials are conducted on men.
I think the one that I found quite interesting.
That's good or bad?
It's horrendous. What about the reaction in our bodies? Like things, drug trials get passed, and actually, we're very different.
Oh, true enough. Okay, number 2 then.
Number 2 was, if you're interested from a policy change perspective, so there's a lady called Polly Higgins. She's unfortunately passed away now, but she was a huge advocate for change within this, and she was a lawyer who was doing it. So it's a really great way to read something that's quite complex, but she's written it in a way that's very, very digestible. So it's called Eradicating Ecocide, and it's essentially her reasonings behind why we need a law of ecocide. So in the same way you can have a law of genocide, it's when a company or a government destroys the environment, who's protecting the environment. And so we should have a law that essentially allows us to have that be accountable. So if there's an oil spill, who's accountable for that, and not allowing it to be something that just is never really resolved. So there's been a couple of interesting cases where that has actually been applied to like a river or something like that, and the river has, it sounds bizarre to say, but the river won, and then something had to be done about reversing it back to its original state to protect it. But it's a fascinating read, and she writes it very eloquently, I think. And then
ecocide. I've heard of the term, obviously, but not really considered it. You got interesting
and I suppose
issues there, and we've got a few things cropped up. And Israel had that horrendous oil spill that they tried to cover up how it happened through the courts, and then you got Brazil that, against all good sense and guidance and Paris agreements, are still raiding the Amazonian forest, and we're kind of standing there going, well, what can you do? It's Brazilian government. Well, perhaps we should be able to do something.
I had a great story about Mark Benioff, the founder of Salesforce, turned around to Bolsonaro and said, do you want me to open a Salesforce office in Brazil? He was like, yeah, I do, really do. He's like, stop destroying the Amazon.
Amazing.
That's building your business planning on ethics in a good way.
Funny talks. If that's what you're going to listen to, I don't actually know what happened at the end of that conversation, but like that there's a way, like, how do we engage and how do we create value for something else then? And it's incredible people who can stand up for them. So Polly Higgins is a Wonder Woman.
And maybe with the recent stuff going on in the Security Council and the UN, I mean, this is the first time the environment, the climate, has been seen as a security risk. Now, of course, we know they mobilize and push peacekeepers into places. Well, maybe there's a different type of peacekeeper that needs to be mobilized and pushed into the countries that are doing the biggest amount of damage to our environment.
Especially when you consider that, I always find it, I think this is the big piece around her work, is that it astounds me that you can think you can protect people's human rights without understanding the environmental context they'll live in. Because you can't protect someone's human rights if they can't breathe, or they don't have access to clean water, or they can't live. So your human rights are slightly irrelevant if you can't physically survive in your immediate surroundings. So that's kind of piecing together those two pieces of very, very important consciousness of how we should be living as a society, I think.
Wow. Okay. That's
Sorry,
what's
that
your
was
final
heavy.
one? I'll give you one more.
And then from a really great B Corp perspective, I'd be remiss not to shout about Patagonia. So Let My People Go Surfing is just, it's a really great read for the ethos of the company and how he changed his company culture to just align with who he is. And a great example being their biggest selling product, they realized it was damaging the very environment with which they wanted to support their consumers to go and love. And so they stopped making it, and they went back to the drawing board and created an alternative. And I think he just does a really good job of bringing to life his culture and what being a B Corp is essentially. And it's a really nice read. So it's a bit more of a light read comparative to the other two.
Compared to the other two.
Maybe it's a business book. So I mean, Debbie is pretty intense. You don't want to have a glass of wine with her. No, I'm joking.
A virtual chat over the concept of ecocide as a global law. Yeah, okay. I think I need a big drink of wine and I don't drink. All right, well, I'm going to finish this off with asking you some fact or fakes. So I'm going to read out a statement, and between the two of you, and you can converse. I'll be in the room, but you can still converse. And you can decide whether it's a fact or a fake. In the US, 60% of people that start small businesses are aged between 40 and 60. Is that a fact or a fake? I'll read it again. 60% of people that start small businesses in the US, and this was, are aged between 40 and 60.
I would say it's probably true.
Yeah, I feel like maybe you would start a career path and then figure out what you're passionate about and then put all your efforts into it. Then that would make more sense.
And you're working. Correct. Yeah.
And yeah, you're absolutely right. It was the research was done because there was a lot of talk saying all the new businesses are being started by millennials and youngsters and 20 to 30s. And when it came down to it, you're right. You learn your trade, you find your niche, your gap, you have your idea, and then you launch very disproportionately to the youngers. Okay, well done. Let's go to the number of female FTSE 100 CEOs has increased from 4 in 2012 to 13 in 2020. That is the top 100 UK firms. Their female CEOs increased from 4 in 2012 to 13 in 2020. Is that a fact or fake?
I think it's fake.
I'd hope that it would be more, but I don't think that would be the case. So yeah, I think it's fake as well.
You're correct. It is sadly 1. It's increased by in 8 years of what we've been going through. So there is now only 5 FTSE 100 CEOs which are women, which is just demonstrative of the battle that's upon us, and the reason that there is such a need for these things like International Women's Day, which is on the 8th of March.
You know what? Someone said something to me last year, and it has stuck with me so much, which is the age that you become a CEO, right, is around kind of, late 40s if you're doing a good job, right? 50s, 60s. What's happening to women at that time? They're going through the menopause.
Yeah.
So you're asking them to take the biggest leap, and probably the primary caregiver, plus they're going through a whole world of I don't even know what, right, where they might spontaneously start sweating or whatever happens. And the company, like the reality of the ask is actually quite massive. And I am way more for having more CEOs and more representation, but I think we've failed to recognize what the challenge, what often the challenge are, because, and we talked to this just before we started recording, the belief is that we're equal, and we're not equal. We're very, very different. And so how do we change the conversation? How do we change the way that we run businesses? So we can have co-CEOs, or we can balance, you know, all of this stuff that enable a diversity of opinion and a more engaged way of working. But
in our business, our intention is to never have a CEO. Why do you need one? You know, if you've got a board that's working together to against an agreed set of aims and goals and strategy and vision and mission and whatever other phrase you might use,
yeah,
why do you need some fake figurehead that's going to, I don't know. I've always thought that, and there's been a couple of councils that have tried it, operating with a board of directors but no CEO, using perhaps a community chairman instead. It's or chairperson, should I say. See, you go. I can't stop myself.
I would probably just quickly add to that as well, that in Invisible Women, there's also a chapter on the kind of recognition that when women start having children, they fall behind essentially in that career journey, because they have to like get back into the workplace, and the workplace isn't always set up to support them in doing that, or running back into what they're doing. And I think that's a really interesting one when you look at the data in that chapter around how do we get better at like supporting women getting back into the workplace. And I actually think the lockdown has in some respects helped that, because you can now, for example, say like, well, they could work from home and do 3 days a week, or could they kind of phase their coming back into the workplace, or do we have better paternity maternity policies where it's more evenly spreading the childcare so that they're not having to take so much time off of work from their career. And I think that's another thing that often holds women back, is just having to, I mean, if you have 2 or 3 kids, that's 10 years of your life potentially of really young children and giving birth, which
or if your career is first, then what have you had to sacrifice to get to it, I suppose, is the other contrapoint to that, isn't it?
There's a big thing about cost. And just one other thing, Debbie, on your point around kind of COVID and the impact it's had, a lot of men who primarily weren't the primary caregivers when it came to their children have suddenly understood how much of a weight that is for women, especially if they're working, and understanding actually the roles and the responsibilities that come with it, which I think is super interesting, because everyone's home the whole time. They realize what's happening. So yeah, I think it'll be an interesting leveler from that perspective. And if that stays or not, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll look forward to watching that one. Okay, final one. And you've won really already, so I'll ask it anyway. The highest paid male CEO earns almost 90% more than the highest paid female CEO. Is that a fact or a fake? The highest paid male CEO earns almost 90% more than the highest paid female one.
And are we talking we're talking globally here?
That is a global fact, yeah.
I mean,
God, I hope it's not true.
But
if we're talking about, well, look at Bezos, right? Didn't he earn more in I can't remember, there's the most petrifying figures about something like if he gave every single employee £100,000 or dollars, he would be back to the same wealth he had started at pre-pandemic levels, or something ridiculous. It's got to be true. It's got to be true, right? If you're looking at that, if you're looking at something like that, then it's got to be true. Fact.
You've wiped the floor with me. You're correct. It's a horrific statistic. You're right, and that's even worse, I think, than the previous one. As you've explained, there's difficulties in women coming back into workforce. This is CEO might be at the wrong time in a woman's life to be able to take on that kind of responsibility, and good chance you'd probably be 70, 80-year-olds before a woman could take a CEO under the same guise. And then when you get there, you're paid half of what the bloke is. It's just, I can't believe it still goes on, really.
But we've come a long way, and I think that's it wasn't that long ago we couldn't vote, and so yes, we've got a long way to go, but let's recognize the wins as well. And I think that's that's key. And
Yeah, I mean, it's a positive point, and it's always very difficult, isn't it? You see these movements which are trying to bring around a justice where injustice exists, and it's a full you when the swing is that way, you need to push that hard to eventually get it to go back to there, and so sometimes the measures seem extreme. It's like I don't know if I mentioned it already, but because my interviews are blurring, but who was it? Elon Musk recently suggested that was it Elon Musk that suggested, I think, that we should just only eat grown meat, and we should 100%, it might not be him actually, it might be somebody else, and we should just stop eating meat. The whole of the Western world should just stop eating meat, stop, absolutely. And it's one of those suggestions which is kind of, okay, that would do that, all of a sudden it would push it that way, but what's the balance? And I think I liked your comment earlier, Kate, that we're not perfect, the businesses aren't perfect, we're not perfect as people.
And I think I would just add to that I think that's where it's really powerful that like we have an ambassador program of CEOs and founders within our community, and that's where it's really an opportunity for our male CEOs and founders to champion our female CEOs and founders, to support them in having that balancing, because I think it's always a misconstrued thing when it's like the idea that you're taking away from one to give to the other, and I think it's more about just like bringing them up so they're at the same place. And I think that's a really lovely element again of our community, is just having that support and knowing that, like, as a female who might be in a leadership role, you're going to get that support from the male counterparts in our community, because that's the value set that they live by, and you don't have to worry about that, because they genuinely do believe that you deserve to be there and you should be there, and they want you to be there and they want to see you as their equal. And I think that's a lovely thing as well, because I can't imagine, it's a generalization, but I can't imagine Jeff Bezos.
No, I think you're right. They'd certainly be trying, and might imperfectly try.
Trying is better than not trying at all. So that's,
and there is the good closing comment. I do thank you very much for spending the time on this special B Corp Month Green Elephant Show series. So thank you, Kate. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you so much, Russell.
Cheers.
We really hope that you found this special B Corp Month episode both informative and entertaining. Make sure you don't miss any of the 31 interviews with B corporations who are striving to be a force for good. So make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss a thing, and don't forget to spread the word with others. If you have any questions about being or becoming a B Corp, or any comments and suggestions about the show, please do get in touch. You can email studio@greenelephant.show, or visit the website greenelephant.show, or find us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube or Twitter by searching for Green Elipod or the Green Elephant Show. You can also review the show on Google and Apple Podcasts. Join us tomorrow, and we hope you have a sustainable day.